The cabin door of a multi-million-dollar aircraft is a gateway. For most, it's a path to a destination. For Eleonora Vance, it was a trap door into humiliation. She wasn't just any passenger in seat 2A, she owned a significant piece of the logo painted on the tail fin. But the woman screaming at her and the flight attendant pulling at her arm saw something else. They saw a black woman who didn't look like she belonged in first class. They were about to learn that assumptions are not just rude, they are catastrophic. The first-class cabin of Aura Airlines Flight 88, non-stop from LAX to JFK, was designed to be a sanctuary. It was a hushed world of brushed aluminum, complimentary champagne, and the polite artificial smiles of the senior cabin crew. For Eleonora Nora Vance, it was supposed to be a 5-hour reprieve. She had just closed a brutal 3-week negotiation in Singapore, routed through LA. She was the co-founder and chief experience officer of Aura Airlines. But today, she was just a tired passenger. She was dressed in her anonymous travel gear, simple black Lululemon leggings, an oversized cashmere sweater, and expensive but unmarked Veja sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her only accessory was a well-worn copy of a new sci-fi novel. She was in seat 2A, the window bulkhead. She had designed this seat herself, meticulously arguing with the engineering team over the precise angle of recline. She had just settled in, her shoes off, her noise-cancelling headphones in, but playing no music, when the storm arrived. The storm's name was Carolyn Baxter. Carolyn blasted into the first-class cabin like a pressure wave. She was on her phone, her voice a sharp, expensive staccato that cut through the cabin's quiet. "Absolutely not, Roger. You tell them their Q4 projections are fantasy. I won't sign off. I don't care if it's Christmas. You get them back." She stopped dead at the entrance to row 2. She looked at Nora, who was observing her over the top of her book. Carolyn's face, tight from what looked like recent cosmetic work, curdled. She snapped her fingers, not at a flight attendant, at Nora. Nora blinked, slowly, and took off her headphones. "Can I help you?" "I think you're in the wrong cabin, honey," Carolyn said, not bothering to lower her voice or cover her phone's receiver. "Coach is that way." She gestured dismissively toward the curtain. Nora felt the familiar, dull thud of adrenaline. The "here we go" feeling. She held up her book, bookmarking her page. "I'm sorry. I think you've made a mistake. This is my seat." "No," Carolyn said flatly. "I don't think it is." She looked around impatiently, flagging down the lead flight attendant, a young woman with Tiffany on her name badge. Tiffany was already flustered from a chaotic boarding process. "Tiffany, thank God!" Carolyn boomed, treating the attendant like a personal concierge. "This woman is in 2A. My pass is for 3C, but I always get 2A or 2D. You need to move her." She clearly wandered up from the back. This was the moment. The pivot point. Tiffany had a choice. She could look at her manifest. She could check Carolyn's pass. She could check Nora's pass. Tiffany looked at Carolyn, decked in a stiff Chanel blazer and exuding the aggressive privilege of a top-tier frequent flyer. Then she looked at Nora in her simple black travel clothes. Tiffany made her choice. She turned to Nora with a smile that was pure, brittle plastic. "Ma'am, I'm sure this is just a simple mix-up. Can I please see your boarding pass?" "Of course," Nora said, her voice quiet, controlled. She unlocked her phone and pulled up the Aura Airlines app. The big, bold digital pass clearly read, "Vance Eleonora, Seat 2A, Group 1. She showed it to Tiffany. Tiffany's smile faltered for a half-second. She had expected a coach ticket, a confused passenger, an easy resolution. This was not it. Carolyn, however, was having none of it. "It's probably a fake," she sneered. or a glitch. Tiffany, I am a Platinum Elite, million-miler member. I spend over $100,000 with this airline every year. This is my route. I know the people who belong up here, and I don't know her. I need this resolved. Now. I understand, Mrs. Baxter. We value your loyalty immensely, Tiffany said, her voice shifting into a conspiratorial whisper, as if she and Carolyn were a team. She turned back to Nora, her smile gone, replaced by a mask of managerial firmness. Ma'am, we seem to have a duplication error in our system, Tiffany lied. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the podium so we can get this sorted out. Nora's blood ran cold. A duplication error, the oldest, laziest excuse in the book to displace an unwanted passenger. Tiffany, Nora said, her voice dangerously calm. There is no duplication. My pass is valid. Mrs. Baxter's seat is 3C. I'm sure if you check her pass, it will confirm that. Tiffany stiffened. Her authority, in her small metal kingdom, had been questioned. This was no longer a customer service issue. It was a compliance issue. Ma'am, I am not going to ask you again, Tiffany said, her voice rising. You need to gather your belongings and come with me. We are holding up the boarding process. I will not, Nora replied, her gaze as hard as steel. This is my assigned, paid for, and confirmed seat. I am a passenger in good standing. You are discriminating against me because this woman, she gestured to Carolyn, is loud and I am not. The cabin was now silent. Everyone was watching. A young man in 1D, a tech bro type named Ben, quietly lifted his phone and hit record. Discriminating? Carolyn shrieked, clutching her pearls. How dare you? I am being inconvenienced. You are being disruptive. Get her off this plane. That's it, Tiffany snapped. The mask of professionalism was gone. You are now a non-compliant passenger. You are a security risk. She reached down and, incredibly, put her hand on Nora's arm. Nora flinched as if struck. All the exhaustion, all the stress of the past 3 weeks coalesced into a single, sharp point of ice-cold fury. Tiffany, Nora said, her voice now barely a whisper, but vibrating with an intensity that made the attendant pause. Take your hand off my arm. I'm calling the gate supervisor, Tiffany said, grabbing her intercom. We have a hostile passenger in 2A. We need removal. Hostile, Nora said, incredulous. I am sitting here, reading a book. You're creating a scene. A few minutes later, Mark Jenkins, the gate supervisor, lumbered onto the plane. He was a man drowning in paperwork and delays. He saw a fuming platinum flyer, Carolyn, a stressed-out flight attendant, Tiffany, and a black woman, Nora, who was sitting stone-faced, refusing to move. He didn't ask questions. He didn't investigate. He saw the path of least resistance. Ma'am, Mark said to Nora, his voice full of forced, weary authority. I'm Mark Jenkins, the station supervisor. We need you to deplane, now. On what grounds? Nora asked. You are delaying the departure of this flight. You are non-compliant with the crew member's instructions. Her instruction was based on a lie, Nora stated. She claimed a duplication that doesn't exist. She's attempting to give my seat to another passenger. I have shown her my valid boarding pass. I will not be moving. Mark sighed. He looked at Tiffany. She won't move. He looked at Carolyn. We're handling this, Mrs. Baxter. Then he turned back to Nora, his patience gone. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Either you walk off this plane, or you will be removed. Nora Vance looked him in the eye. I built this airline on the principle that customer experience is everything. And you, Mark, and you, Tiffany, have just failed on every conceivable level. Do not touch me. But for Mark, The word security had been invoked, the magic word that absolved him of thought. He gestured to the 2 airport police officers who had followed him onto the jet bridge. "She's refusing," he said. The officers boarded. They were big men, and their presence sucked the remaining air out of the cabin. "Ma'am, you have to come with us," the first officer said. "I have done nothing wrong," Nora said, her voice shaking slightly for the first time. Not with fear, but with a profound, bone-deep humiliation. "Last chance," the officer said. Nora gripped her armrests. "This is my seat." The officer grabbed her left arm, the other grabbed her right, and in the hushed, horrified silence of the first-class cabin, with Ben's phone recording every second, they began to pull. Nora didn't scream. She didn't fight. She went rigid. They had to haul her, physically, out of the custom-designed seat she herself had approved. They dragged her past a smugly triumphant Carolyn Baxter. They dragged her past a pale but righteous-looking Tiffany. They dragged her through the galley and off the jet bridge, her shoes left behind, her novel tumbling into the aisle. As they pulled her into the terminal, Nora Vance finally spoke, her voice echoing in the jet bridge. "You have all just made the biggest mistake of your lives." Yeah, Mark muttered, watching her go. "Tell it to the judge." He turned back to the plane. "Tiffany, get Mrs. Baxter settled in 2A. Let's close this door. We're already 30 minutes behind." Nora was marched into the terminal gate area. She was disoriented, her dignity stripped bare. Passengers in the crowded B-level terminal of LAX stared. They saw a disheveled black woman, missing one sneaker, being held by the arm by 2 airport police officers. They saw a problem, a threat, a criminal. Mark Jenkins, the supervisor, followed them out, brushing his hands together as if finishing a dirty job. "Okay, officers, she's all yours." She was non-compliant and delaying a federal aircraft. He said the words with a practiced, rote detachment. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the first officer said, his voice firm but not unkind. He was just doing his job. "We need to see your identification." "It's on my phone," Nora said, her voice a low, tight rasp. "Which is in my hand. If you would be so kind as to let go of my arm, I can retrieve it." The officer released her. Nora's hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline so potent it made her nauseous. She ignored the dozens of eyes on her. She ignored the snickers from a group of teenagers. She calmly unlocked her phone. She didn't open her ID. She opened her contacts. "Ma'am, I need your ID, not a phone call," the officer said, stepping closer. "You will want to wait for this," Nora said, holding up one finger. She scrolled to D. David Friedman, Chief Counsel. She hit the call button. It was 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time. David Friedman was on the 405 freeway, in gridlock traffic, listening to a podcast about mergers and acquisitions. His car's Bluetooth chimed. He glanced at the dash. Eleonora Vance. He frowned. Nora never called him directly, unless it was a 5-alarm fire. She was supposed to be on her way back from the Singapore trip, offline, sleeping on a plane. He thumbed the accept button. "Nora, what's wrong? Are you okay? I thought you were in the air." "David," Nora's voice came through, and it was a voice he had never heard before. It was flat, cold, and vibrating with pressure. "This is Eleonora Vance. I am at gate 77A at LAX. I have just been forcibly and physically removed from my seat on Flight 88 by your gate supervisor, Mark Jenkins, and your lead flight attendant, Tiffany." David Friedman's blood turned to ice. He slammed on his brakes, earning a furious honk from the Prius behind him. "What?" he stammered. "I am currently in the terminal, surrounded by 3 of your passengers filming me. and in the custody of 2 LAX airport police officers. You have exactly 60 seconds to explain to me what happens next before I call Robert, and my next call after that is to the New York Times. Robert Sterling, the CEO. Nora, Nora, David said, his mind unable to process the words. Flight 88, seat 2A. He knew her travel schedule. He knew 2A was always blocked for her or Robert. Yes, David, Nora said. They gave my seat to another passenger who looked the part more than I did. I was dragged, physically dragged, off the plane. Now, 60 seconds. Go. Don't move, don't say anything. I'm handling it, David shrieked, fumbling for his own phone. He put Nora on mute. His fingers flew. He called the Airline's Global Operations Center, the Nerve Center in Dallas. He used a code that bypassed the queue. This is Friedman. Code red. Ground stop flight 88 at LAX. Ground stop it now. No one moves. No one gets off. No one closes a door. Get me the station manager, Alan Price, on the line. Get me the captain. Get me Robert Sterling. Now. Back on Flight 88, the victory was sweet. The jet bridge door was still open, but the final passengers were aboard. Carolyn Baxter was comfortably settled in seat 2A. Tiffany, her face flushed with triumph, came over with a glass of champagne. Mrs. Baxter, a pre-departure glass of Veuve Clicquot, with our compliments. We apologize profusely for that disturbance. Carolyn took the glass, her smile thin and victorious. Thank you, Tiffany. It's just so rare to see staff willing to handle a situation these days. That woman was clearly unstable. You did the right thing. We always protect our most valued customers, Mrs. Baxter, Tiffany said, preening. In seat 1D, Ben, the tech bro, stopped recording. He had 10 minutes of gold. He had Nora's polite refusal. He had Carolyn's insults. He had Tiffany's escalation. He had Mark's arrival. And he had the final, horrifying shot of 2 officers dragging a compliant, non-yelling woman out of her seat. He connected to the paid LAX Wi-Fi. He titled the video, Airlines forcibly drags black woman from first-class seat for a white passenger. He began uploading it to YouTube, tagging Airlines, the Shade Room, and every major news outlet he could think of. In the cockpit, Captain David Harrison was buttoning up his pre-flight checks. He was annoyed. They were now 45 minutes delayed. His intercom buzzed. It was Mark, the gate supervisor. Okay, Captain, the passenger has been removed. We're clear to close up. Sorry for the delay. About time, the captain muttered to his first officer. Cabin crew, prepare for door closure. Tiffany picked up the cabin phone. Cabin is secure, Captain. Ready to... She was cut off by a sudden, frantic squawk from the gate. Mark Jenkins' voice, no longer smug, blasted over the intercom. Captain, hold the gate! Hold the gate! Do not close that door! Captain Harrison grabbed his mic. What is it now, Mark? We're already an hour late. Simultaneously, Mark's personal radio on his hip exploded to life, with a voice that made his blood run cold. It wasn't the shift manager. It was Alan Price, the LAX station director, the big boss. And he wasn't talking. He was screaming. Mark Jenkins, what did you do? My God, man, what did you do? Who did you just remove from Flight 88? Mark went pale. What? Sir? A non-compliant passenger. A Jane Doe. She was disrupting the cabin. You idiot! Price's voice cracked over the radio. That wasn't a Jane Doe. That was Eleonora Vance, the co-founder. In the terminal, the 2 police officers were getting nervous. Nora was just standing there, phone in hand, watching the jet bridge. She looked as calm as a marble statue. Ma'am, your ID. The first officer began again, more gently this time. Before he could finish, 3 people burst through the security doors, running full tilt. 2 were in Aura Airlines executive suits, panting. The third was Alan Price, the station director, his face the color of ash. "Nora! Nora! Oh my God!" Price skidded to a halt in front of her, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't look at the police. He looked at Nora. "Mr. Price," Nora said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Ma'am," the police officer said, stepping between them. "This is an official matter." Alan Price wheeled on the officer. "This is not an official matter. This is our matter. This is Ms. Eleonora Vance. She is the co-founder and chief officer of this airline. What are you doing?" The 2 officers froze. They looked at each other. They looked at Nora. The one who had touched her arm visibly paled. We were called for a non-compliant passenger removal, sir," the officer stammered. Mark Jenkins, who had jogged back up the jet bridge to see what the commotion was, appeared at the gate door. He saw Alan Price, he saw the executives, he saw the police, and he saw Nora standing in the middle of them all, looking directly at him. His world collapsed. Nora's phone chimed, a text from David Friedman. "CIO is on the line. He's patching into the aircraft's comms system. He wants to talk to the crew, and he wants you to walk back on that plane. The choice is yours." Nora took a deep breath. She looked at Mark, his face a mask of dawning, sickening horror. She looked at Alan Price, who was sweating through his suit. "I want my shoe," she said. In the chaotic gate area, all eyes were fixed on the small group by the podium. Nora's demand hung in the air, sharp and clear. "I want my shoe." It was a test of power, of contrition, of reality. Alan Price, the LAX station director, the man responsible for thousands of employees and billions of dollars in assets, didn't hesitate. "Yes, Ms. Vance, right away." He turned and sprinted down the jet bridge, his executive loafers slapping on the metal ramp. He burst back into the first-class cabin. The entire crew, who had been clustered in the galley, whispering frantically about the hold, froze. "Mr. Price," Tiffany said, her voice high with panic. "What's going on?" Alan Price didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes scanned the aisle and found the lone, black Veja sneaker lying on its side, a pathetic piece of evidence. He snatched it up. Carolyn Baxter, still in 2A, was incensed by the intrusion. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Can someone please tell me what this delay is? I have a meeting in New York. This is the worst service I have ever—" Alan Price wheeled on her. His face was mottled with a terrifying blood-red fury. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You do not say one more word." His voice was so venomous, so unlike the polished corporate tone she was used to, that Carolyn physically recoiled. She snapped her mouth shut. Price spun and ran back off the plane. He emerged onto the jet bridge, panting, and stopped in front of Nora. The police officers had backed away, forming a respectful distance. They were no longer law enforcement. They were witnesses. Mark Jenkins, the gate supervisor, was visibly shaking, his face the color of old oatmeal. And then Alan Price did something that cemented the new reality. He bent down on one knee, a corporate knight, apologizing to his queen, and held out the sneaker. "Miss Vance," he panted. I am so sorry." Nora looked down at him, then at the shoe. She took it from his hand. She did not rush. She calmly slipped her foot into it, adjusted the tongue, and tied the laces. Each second of the mundane action was a turn of the screw. She was in complete control. When she finished, she stood up straight and finally looked at Mark Jenkins. Mark visibly flinched. "Ms. Vance, please," he stammered. I had no idea." Nora took one step toward him, and he took one step back. "You had no idea what, Mark?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. that I was a co-founder, or that I was a human being deserving of basic dignity. Which one of those facts would have changed your actions today? Mark had no answer. He just opened and closed his mouth, a fish gasping for air. I was just following procedure, he whispered. You were the procedure, Nora corrected him. You made a choice. You heard a complaint from one passenger, and you looked at me, and you made a choice. She turned away from him, her dismissal more complete than any firing. She looked at Alan Price, who was now standing, his hands clasped, awaiting judgment. Is the aircraft secure? Nora asked. Yes, Miss Vank. He was cut off by a sharp click from the speakers all around them at the gate. And simultaneously, inside the aircraft, every PA speaker came to life. A new voice filled the air. It was not the captain. It was not the gate. It was a voice broadcast from a speakerphone in the Dallas Operations Center, patched through by a frantic David Friedman. A voice that was crisp, powerful, and echoing with a rage that had been chilled to absolute zero. This is Robert Sterling. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Aura Airlines. In the first-class cabin, Tiffany, who was trying to explain to the other attendants what was happening, froze. Her hand went to her mouth. In seat 2A, Carolyn Baxter's eyes widened. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. In seat 1D, Ben, who had been pretending to read, slowly and deliberately raised his phone and hit record again. We are currently holding this aircraft at the gate. Robert's voice boomed through the cabin. Due to a catastrophic failure of customer service and, frankly, of basic human decency. A few moments ago, a member of our senior cabin crew, assisted by our gate supervisor, unlawfully removed a passenger from this flight. In the galley, Tiffany let out a tiny, strangled sound. She backed against the beverage cart, her knees buckling. They did this, Robert continued, his voice sharp as a razor, at the behest of another passenger who felt entitled to a seat that was not hers. Our staff claimed a duplication that did not exist. They bypassed de-escalation. They bypassed protocol. They bypassed common sense. They escalated a situation, and they put their hands on and forcibly dragged a woman from her confirmed, paid-for seat. Carolyn Baxter was no longer annoyed. She was terrified. She stared at the complimentary champagne in her hand as if it were poison. She suddenly, desperately, wished she was in her assigned seat, 3C. The passenger they removed, Robert's voice dropped, becoming heavier, was Ms. Eleonora Vance. A collective gasp from the three other flight attendants. One of them whispered, Vance? The Vance? For those of you who do not know that name, Robert Sterling's voice thundered. I suggest you learn it. She is my co-founder. She is the Chief Experience Officer of this company. She is the reason your seats recline to 180 degrees. She is the reason you have a loyalty program at all. She is Aura Airlines. Tiffany began to sob, not loudly, but in small, gulping, horrifying gasps. She slid down the wall of the galley and sat on the floor, her carefully constructed world shattered. Carolyn Baxter's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The blood drained from it. She looked at the cockpit. She looked at the galley. She looked at the cabin door. She was trapped. The woman she had dismissed, the woman she had told to go to coach, the woman she'd had removed, owned the entire company. Robert's voice concluded. Captain Harrison, you are to stand by. The passenger is returning to her seat. And Tiffany. And Mark. You will be met by airport security, who will escort you from the premises. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. We will see you in court. The intercom clicked off. The silence that fell over the cabin was absolute. It was a vacuum, broken only by Tiffany's pathetic whimpers. Every passenger was frozen, staring at the empty seat. 2A. The throne. In the terminal, Nora listened to the entire broadcast. She closed her eyes as Robert spoke, not in relief, but in sorrow. It had come to this. When the speakers clicked off, she opened her eyes. She looked at Alan Price. "Please escort me back to my seat." The jet bridge became a strange, silent stage. Mark Jenkins, the supervisor, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his body rigid, his face slack with disbelief. The airport police officers, now fully grasping the magnitude of their error, stepped back, melting into the background. Nora Vance stood, fully composed, her shoe tied. Alan Price, the station director, was at her side, his posture that of a Secret Service agent protecting a president. "This way, Miss Vance," he said, gesturing to the open door of the aircraft. Nora walked past Mark Jenkins. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. As she passed, he seemed to deflate, the last of his false authority vanishing. He slumped against the gate podium, his radio crackling with unheard commands. One of the police officers, seeing his new status, moved toward him. "Sir," the officer said, his voice now clipped and official, "we need your badge, and we need you to come with us. You need to make a statement." Mark, in a daze, was led away, his career in aviation over. Nora stepped back onto the aircraft. The atmosphere was electric. The remaining cabin crew, including the purser, were lined up by the galley, their faces pale and rigid with fear. They looked like soldiers awaiting a court-martial. The purser, a man named Gary, stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Miss Vance, Ma'am, welcome back. I am so... We..." Nora cut him off with a simple, sharp nod. "Please prepare the cabin for departure, Gary. We are an hour behind schedule." It was a brilliant move. In one sentence, she had re-established the chain of command, reminded them of their duty, and shifted the focus from her humiliation to their shared objective. She wasn't a victim to be pitied. She was the boss, and she was back on the clock. Yes, ma'am, right away," Gary stammered, grateful for the command. Nora turned and began the long, slow walk down the aisle to seat 2A. Every passenger in the first-class cabin stared. Ben, in 1D, was filming, his phone held low. He captured her walk, head high, back straight, her expression not one of anger, but of profound, steely resolve. She reached row 2, and she stopped. Carolyn Baxter was still in seat 2A. She was frozen, a grotesque statue of entitlement, her hand still clutching the champagne flute. She was trapped between the woman she had assaulted and the window. Nora said nothing. She just stood there. She waited. The silence in the cabin was so complete, so heavy, it was almost impossible to breathe. In that silence, Carolyn Baxter broke. She began to stammer, her voice a high, reedy squeak. Oh my God, I didn't mean, I just thought. You thought what? Nora asked, her voice quiet, but it carried through the entire cabin. That I didn't belong? It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, Carolyn pleaded, her eyes darting around for help. There was none. No, Nora said, her voice like ice. It was a choice. You saw me, and you made a choice. And Tiffany, she glanced towards the galley, made a choice, and Mark made a choice. Now, get out of my seat. Carolyn Baxter scrambled. It was not a graceful exit. It was a panicked, clumsy ejection. She fumbled for her crocodile skin handbag, dropping her phone. She banged her knee on the bulkhead. The champagne flute tipped over, spilling pale gold liquid onto the plush carpet. She finally lurched into the aisle, a disheveled, terrified wreck. But she had nowhere to go. She was standing in the aisle, a pariah. Just as she was trying to regain her composure, Two new figures appeared at the head of the cabin. They were not airline crew. They were Aura corporate security in sharp black suits, followed by Alan Price. Alan Price ignored Carolyn. He pointed directly into the galley at Tiffany, who was still huddled on the floor, sobbing. "Her," Price commanded the security officers. "Her credentials are revoked. Escort her from the aircraft. She is not to touch any company property. She is banned from the premises." "No!" Tiffany shrieked, scrambling to her feet as the security men advanced. "Please, I have a mortgage. I have kids. It was a mistake. Please, I was just trying to help a customer." "You didn't help a customer," Alan Price said, his voice raw. "You assaulted an owner. Get her out." The security men took her by the arms, one on the left, one on the right, just as she had done to Nora. "No, please, Mrs. Baxter, tell them," Tiffany pleaded, looking at Carolyn. But Carolyn was staring at her own, separate doom. Tiffany was hauled, weeping and struggling, down the aisle. The very passengers she had tried to impress now watched her in stony silence as she was physically removed from the plane, her walk of shame a perfect, karmic echo of the crime she had committed. When she was gone, Alan Price turned his attention to the last remaining problem. Carolyn Baxter, still standing in the aisle. "Mrs. Baxter," Alan said, his voice flat. Carolyn tried to muster one last shred of her former self. I am a Platinum Elite member. I demand to be reseated. In my original seat. 3C. I will write a letter." Alan Price looked at her as if she were something he'd scraped off his shoe. "You were a Platinum Elite member, Mrs. Baxter. As of 5 minutes ago, your status, your miles, and your privileges have been permanently revoked." Carolyn's face went blank with shock. You can't do that." "I can," Price said. "You willfully caused a disturbance. You made false claims to a flight crew, resulting in the delay of this aircraft and the battery of a passenger. You are a Class A security risk. Your ticket for this flight is cancelled. Your funds will be refunded. You are banned from Aura Airlines. For life?" He gestured to the open door. "Get off this aircraft, now, voluntarily, or these security officers will arrest you for trespassing." The fight was gone. Carolyn Baxter, the PR executive, the million-miler, was broken. With a choked sob, she grabbed her handbag and stumbled, blinded by tears, down the aisle and off the plane, her humiliation complete. The cabin was silent. The two perpetrators were gone. Nora Vance watched her go. Then she took her copy of her novel from the overhead bin where the crew had hastily stuffed it. She sat down in 2A. She buckled her seatbelt. A moment later, Captain David Harrison emerged from the cockpit. He walked to Nora's seat. He was a tall man, exuding a quiet authority, and he was visibly shaken. "Miss Vance," he said, and the whole cabin leaned in to listen. "On behalf of the flight deck crew, there are no words. I am the captain of this vessel. The safety and dignity of every passenger are my responsibility. What happened to you on my ship it's appalling, it's unforgivable, and it will not stand." Nora looked up at him. She saw the genuine shame and integrity in his eyes. "Thank you, Captain Harrison," she said, her voice finally softening. "This was not your failure, but it is now your delay. Please get these people to New York." "Yes, ma'am," he said, with a nod of profound respect. He turned and marched back to the cockpit. In 1D, Ben stopped recording. He hit save. He looked at the 22-minute file. He looked at Nora, who had already opened her book. The new purser, Gary, approached her seat, his hands shaking. "Ms. Vance, can I get you anything? A glass of champagne? Water?" Nora looked up from her book. A bottle of water and a ginger ale. "And please," she said, "make sure the rest of the cabin is served promptly. They've been very patient." The jet bridge door closed. The flight was, at last, underway. The 5-hour journey from Los Angeles to New York was the strangest, most tension-filled flight of Captain Harrison's 30-year career. The first-class cabin was a library of ghosts. Nora Vance, after politely accepting a ginger ale and a bottle of water from a visibly trembling purser, opened her laptop. She connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, and for the entire flight, she worked. She was not a victim. She was a general. She typed with a silent, furious rhythm, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. She was on a video call, with her headphones in, with Robert Sterling and David Friedman for the first hour, planning the response. She was drafting memos. She was, in real time, handling the crisis she herself was at the center of. The remaining flight attendants moved through the cabin on eggshells. They were exquisitely polite. Every sir and ma'am was delivered with a strained, fearful precision. They avoided row 2 as much as possible, only approaching when Nora summoned them with her call button, which she did exactly once, to ask for a pen. The other passengers were silent, but their phones were active. They kept stealing glances at Nora, who sat like a queen in her reclaimed throne, oblivious to them, her focus absolute. They were all texting, emailing, and posting. You will not believe what I am seeing on Aura Flight 88. But they were all secondary to Ben in 1D. Ben, the tech bro, had a top-tier Wi-Fi package. His first video, the 10-minute one, titled "Aura Airlines Forcibly Drags Black Woman from First-Class Seat for a White Passenger," had finished uploading just before the cabin door closed. It hit the internet like a missile. By the time Flight 88 was over the Rocky Mountains, the video had 500,000 views. By the time it crossed the Mississippi River, it had 3 million. The tags had worked. Aura Airlines' Twitter, now X account, was a smoking crater. The first wave of comments was pure, unadulterated rage. "This is disgusting at Aura Airlines. Firing everyone involved now. Just cancelled my Aura credit card, so flying while black. That poor woman, and that horrible Karen in 2A. Find her." Aura's PR team, caught completely flat-footed, issued a pre-written, corporate-approved statement. "We are aware of the incident on Flight 88 and are actively investigating the situation. Aura Airlines has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind." This statement was like pouring gasoline on a forest fire. The internet tore it apart. "Investigating? We all saw the video. Fire them." Then, somewhere over Ohio, Ben unleashed his second weapon. He had been editing the footage. He uploaded his 22-minute director's cut. He titled this one, "Karma Update. The woman they dragged off Flight 88 was the airline's Keo founder." This was the explosion. The story changed instantly. It was no longer just a tragedy. It was a saga. It was a story of hubris and comeuppance. It wasn't just racist airline. It was employees and passenger mess with the wrong woman. The internet went insane. This is the greatest plot twist of all time. The way the CEO fired them over the PA system. I am living for this. That Carolyn woman in 2A, her face when she realized, OMG, someone find this Carolyn. The story was now the #1 trending topic on Earth. News outlets, who had been cautiously reporting the first video, now went all in. TMZ, the Daily Mail, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they all broke into their programming. A developing story in the skies. While Nora Vance was 35,000 feet in the air, she had become the most famous woman in America. The first tremors of the earthquake were already hitting the perpetrators. At LAX, Tiffany was in the employee parking garage, sitting in her 2012 Honda Civic. Her phone was vibrating so hard it was rattling in the cup holder. Texts from friends, family, and former colleagues. Is this you? I just saw you on TMZ. Tiffany, what did you do? She watched the video, her hand over her mouth, and saw herself, not as a hero, but as a villain. She saw her own sneer, her own hand reaching for Nora. She was unemployable. She was a pariah. Mark Jenkins was still at the LAX police station. What started as a witness statement had turned into something far more serious. Mr. Jenkins, the detective said, we've reviewed the passenger's video. We're going to need you to contact a lawyer. You are being investigated for battery and unlawful imprisonment. He wasn't just fired, he was facing criminal charges. And in a $10 million mansion in Beverly Hills, Carolyn Baxter was pouring her third vodka on the rocks. She'd fled the airport in a cab, her face hidden. But the internet was fast. Ben's video was clear. Someone in the comments recognized her. Wait, isn't that Carolyn Baxter, the PR woman from Baxter Communications? Her name was leaked. Her company's Yelp and Google pages were inundated with one-star reviews. Racist CEO. Assaults black women. Her phone rang. It was Roger, the man she'd been on the phone with when she boarded. He was her firm's biggest client. Carolyn, he said, his voice cold. I just saw a video. We're pulling our account. He hung up. Her phone rang again. It was the CEO of the company that owned her building. Carolyn, we are terminating your lease. The hard karma was just beginning. Flight 88 descended into the dark, glittering expanse of New York City. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed. Nora closed her laptop. She put her novel away. She looked out the window at the city she called home, the city where she had, 10 years ago, sketched the Aura Airlines logo on a napkin with Robert Sterling. The plane touched down at JFK with a gentle bump. As it taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the PA, but it wasn't the standard post-flight speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Harrison said, we are at the gate. We ask that you please remain seated. We will be deplaning slightly differently today. Please allow Ms. Vance in 2A to deplane first. The cabin was silent. When the jet bridge connected and the door opened, Nora stood. She gathered her bag. She walked to the front, nodded to the ashen-faced cabin crew, and stepped off the plane. She was expecting a quiet exit. She was wrong. The gate area was a zoo. Robert Sterling, her co-founder and CEO, was there, flanked by a team of private security. But beyond them, held back by airport police, was a wall of media. Paparazzi, TMZ, CNN, news crews with cameras. Someone had leaked the flight number. "Nora! Nora!" they shouted. "How do you feel? What will happen to the crew?" "Aura is racist!" Robert Sterling rushed forward and pulled her into a fierce hug. "Nora! My God, I'm so sorry. I scrambled." Nora hugged him back, but she was watching the media storm over his shoulder. Her expression was grim. "It's okay, Robert," she said, pulling back. "But we have work to do. A lot of work." She turned, flanked by security, and began to walk. The cameras flashed, turning the terminal into a strobing, chaotic nightmare. She didn't hide her face. She looked directly into the cameras, her face a mask of dignified, exhausted resolve. She was no longer just a co-founder. She was a symbol. The 24 hours following the landing of Flight 88 were a corporate inferno. Aura Airlines' stock was in a nosedive. Robert Sterling and Eleonora Vance, now the face of a national scandal, called an emergency press conference. The room was a sea of flashing cameras. Robert, looking grim, spoke first. "Yesterday, Aura Airlines failed. We failed on a human level, a procedural level, and a moral level. We offer our profound, unreserved apology to my partner, Eleanora Vance." Then Nora stepped up to the podium. She was not the disheveled passenger from the video. She was in a sharp, dark blue power suit, her authority absolute. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "What happened to me was not an incident. It was a symptom. It was the predictable and ugly result of a culture that allows implicit bias to go unchecked. My humiliation will not be a 24-hour scandal. It will be a catalyst. We will fix this, and I will personally oversee it." She didn't take questions. She had delivered her verdict. But behind the scenes, the hard karma was already in motion, swift and brutal. For Tiffany Larson, the lead flight attendant, the CEO's mid-air termination was just the beginning. She woke up to find her face plastered on tabloids with the headline, "AIR Head." Ben's video, now with over 100 million views, was her legacy. She was a global meme for racism and incompetence. She was unemployable. No airline would touch her. A week later, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office formally charged her with 1 count of battery and 1 count of false imprisonment, using the video as its primary evidence. To complete her ruin, Aura Airlines' legal team filed a $10 million civil suit against her for intentional damage to brand reputation. She lost her job, her reputation, and her freedom. She declared bankruptcy within 6 months. Mark Jenkins, the gate supervisor, fared no better. As a manager, his culpability was deemed even greater. He was charged alongside Tiffany, but his true downfall was professional. He appealed to his union, citing his 22 years of service. The union, after reviewing the video of him lying to the police, dropped him. Then came the kill shot. The FAA revoked his security and operational clearance. Without it, he couldn't even work as a baggage handler. His career in aviation was over, vaporized in the 5 minutes he chose to believe a bully over checking a manifest. The $10 million civil suit from Aura ensured he would spend the rest of his life paying for that choice, his pension and savings wiped out by the judgment. But the hardest karma was reserved for Carolyn Baxter. She thought her wealth and status made her untouchable. She was wrong. The internet had identified her before Flight 88 even landed. She was the CEO of Baxter Communications, a high-end PR firm. Her clients, seeing their own PR guru at the center of the world's biggest PR crisis, fled. By 9:02 a.m. the next morning, her company had lost 100% of its clients. Her staff quit en masse. But Aura wasn't finished. On behalf of both the corporation and Nora Vance personally, the legal team filed a $50 million lawsuit against her for defamation, tortious interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The airline's lawyers argued her actions were the sole, malicious catalyst for the entire disaster. Carolyn's legal battles destroyed her. She was forced to sell her $10 million Beverly Hills mansion to pay her lawyers. She lost. The jury, seeing the video of her smug, victorious face, awarded the full amount. The Queen of 2A was bankrupted, a social pariah, a woman who had leveraged her privilege one last time, only to discover she had done it to the one person on Earth who owned the plane. The fall of Tiffany, Mark, and Carolyn was a global spectacle, a modern-day morality play devoured by millions. The lawsuits were finalized, the judgments rendered. The internet, its thirst for justice slaked, eventually moved on. But Eleanora Vance did not. For her, the victory was hollow. The videos made her skin crawl. The fact that her employees, her people, had been so quick to dehumanize her was a personal, structural failure. The fact that a passenger felt so empowered to demand another human's removal was a sickness. The hard karma was just the consequence. It was not the solution. Nora, with the full, terrified backing of her board of directors, grounded herself. She didn't fly for 6 months. Instead, she went to work. She took the catastrophe and, as she had promised, turned it into a catalyst. She gathered a team of sociologists, de-escalation experts, and civil rights leaders. She tore Aura's entire employee training manual apart. She threw it out. And she started from scratch. 1 year after the incident, Aura Airlines unveiled the Vance Initiative. It was not a diversity seminar. It was not a 2-hour webinar. It was a complete, top-to-bottom, multi-million-dollar cultural overhaul. 1. The 2A Protocol, a new, ironclad rule. A customer's valid boarding pass was treated as an absolute, inviolable contract. No passenger could ever be removed for a duplication error unless a supervisor had physically verified the duplication at the podium. A conflict between 2 passengers would never result in a removal unless a direct, physical threat was made. 2. Bias recognition training. Every single Aura employee, from the CEO down to the baggage handlers, was required to pass a rigorous 40-hour in-person course on implicit bias, conflict de-escalation, and cultural humility. It was led by the experts Nora had hired. Passing it was not optional. It was a condition of employment. 3. The empowered employee. The new system was designed to protect employees from passenger bullying. A new policy, broadcast on the Aura website, stated that any passenger who was abusive, discriminatory, or made threats toward staff or other passengers would be subject to immediate, permanent banning. It gave crew members the power to shut down a Carolyn Baxter before she could escalate. 4. The blind review. Nora implemented a system where passenger complaints about staff and staff complaints about passengers were initially reviewed with all names, genders, and racial identifiers redacted. This forced managers to judge the incident, not the people. The Vance Initiative was painful. It was expensive. The airline lost some old guard employees who didn't want to be told how to think. But the airline that emerged was stronger, more resilient, and built on a foundation of genuine respect. 2 years after the incident, Nora Vance was on a flight, Aura 88, LAX to JFK. She was in seat 2A. The purser, a young man who had been through the initiative, was greeting passengers. "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance," he said, with a genuine, warm smile. "It's an honor to have you." "It's good to be here, David," she said, knowing his name. The flight was peaceful, but as they were descending into JFK, a commotion came from the main cabin. A man was yelling at a flight attendant, jabbing his finger in her face, furious that she had asked him to put his oversized bag under the seat. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "I'm a platinum member. Do you know who I am?" Nora unbuckled her seatbelt. The new purser, David, was already there. He didn't touch the passenger. He stood at a respectful distance, his body language calm, his hands open. "Sir," David said, his voice firm and clear, "I can hear that you are frustrated, but your tone and your gesture are not acceptable. You have 2 choices. You can place the bag under the seat, or you can be met by security at the gate. We will not be negotiating. The choice is yours." The man, stunned by the calm, unbreakable confidence, sputtered. He looked around for support. He found none. Defeated, he shoved the bag under the seat. Nora sat back down. She buckled her belt. She looked out the window and, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The system had worked. The karma had hit, but the change had stuck. She hadn't just gotten her seat back. She had rebuilt the airline to make sure no one would ever have to fight for theirs again. And that is how a moment of profound prejudice became a billion-dollar lesson in accountability. The video of Carolyn Baxter's downfall and Tiffany's firing was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. It was a warning to every corporation. The person you underestimate might just be the one signing your paycheck. Eleanora Vance didn't just reclaim her seat. She rebuilt the entire airline to be worthy of its passengers. What did you think of the karma in this story? Was it deserved? More importantly, what do you think of the Vance initiative? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder of what happens when bias goes unchecked and what one person can do to fix a broken system. If you want more true life stories of drama, karma, and incredible plot twists, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click that bell so you never miss a single story.